Hey everybody, glad you could join us again today here at Flint Eastwood's Armory. Today is part 2 of reloading supplies and equipment that you're going to need. This section, we're covering a lot of things. I'm going to try and make this as short as possible. Okay, this case here is pretty standard, pretty self-explanatory, okay? This is something you put reloaded ammunition into and you take to the field with you, okay? I personally numbered mine on the side. Depending on what row I have what in, I always put a piece of paper inside of here and I label it. Row 1 is this, row 2 is this, blah, blah, blah. This is just a wood block, okay? This is what I use while I'm reloading. I put brass in here, and at different stages I move it to different holes so that way I don't forget one or I don't double load one, okay? This is something you could easily just make yourself. The only thing is, if you drill a hole into a piece of wood and you don't go all the way through, the bottom of it is not going to be flat because the drill bit has an angled edge, okay? So you're going to want to take a piece of wood, drill it all the way through, and take another piece and put on the bottom of it, so then that way you have a flat bottom. Something else you can use too, this is just out of a bulk ammo box, piece of styrofoam, whatever. Another thing you can use here, keep your old boxes, okay? That's exactly what I do with this. Same thing, storage in here, okay? If you reload some ammo for somebody else or you want to give somebody else some rounds to try, this is the perfect deal right here. You put the loads in here, you just put a piece of duct tape over here or something, write exactly what it is on there, and then boom, if you never get it back, it doesn't matter. So now we're going to start going through the process a little bit while also mostly focusing on what the equipment does, okay? So we're going to start here, piece of brass, fired. I have not sized it yet, deprimed it, okay? First things I do when I get a piece of brass after I fired, I look to see how many times I've fired this piece of brass. When I get to be up 3 or 4 times, I start checking it for cracks, okay? I get a very good light. I use my fingernail, and I just ride my fingernail along the rim here, along the neck, waiting for my fingernail to catch a crack, or if I can visibly see one, okay? Also, down here at the bottom, you can see the color change. Okay, that's from your brass sizer. That's where it stops. You can get a bulge down here which can create a weak spot. Another thing to keep your eye out for. After I check everything over, I grab my little piece of steel wool I got here. I just give the outside of the brass a couple quick spins here, especially focusing on the neck area. Look at that. Shined up real nice. After that, I grab a little nylon brush that I got. Just give it a couple in and outs. Good. After that, I'm going to take my deburring tool here. I'm going to use it. This goes on the inside of the neck, okay? You're not going to put too much pressure, just a little bit. You're just going to give it a little twist, just like that. Same with the outside, okay? Just a little bit. Okay? Now, your piece of brass is ready to go into your press for sizing and removal of the primer. So now let's say we got that all done. This is all cleaned up, ready to go in the press. But before we do that, since this has been fired 3 times, I always go for a length check, okay? Use a dial indicator or a dial caliper, whatever you'd like to call it, and just go from end to end with the brass, okay? Look in your reloading manual. It will tell you what the measurement should be. Make sure that you put it in there, put a decent amount of pressure down here with your thumb, okay? And I like to just spin it a little bit just to make sure that I've got an accurate measurement, okay? I look, see, okay, this brass is bad. It's too long. First thing I'm going to do is use this tool right here, okay? This tool goes inside of the neck and it removes the burr that's in here where the cone comes to the, basically the top of the cone you would call it, or the bottom of the neck, okay? This one I already did, so it slides right on this, nice. But this tool is for removing a bubble that forms in here at the base of the neck or the top of the cone, whatever you'd like to call it. So basically, how you're going to do that, you got a handle here. This goes right inside of here like this, okay? Boom. First, you got to make sure you have the right size shell holder in there, which I do. So, boom, slides right in just like your press. Then you're going to spin the handle while holding the top, okay? And you're just going to tighten that up. Now that piece of brass is tight in here, so it's not going to spin on you. Then you're going to take this. Sometimes I like to just put this right in a vise, okay? But you're just going to do this. You're going to spin it, spin it, spin it. Boom. Look at that. It's on there, okay? And if you'll notice, there's another piece on here that's small, okay? That's another blade, another cutting edge, okay? And if you look on this brass, I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. Probably not. But you can see on here where that secondary cutting edge took a little bit off. That meant that there's just a little bit of excess material sticking out of the side there. Watch it again. Just going to slide it right on. Keep spinning it while you're doing it. Slide it all the way down to the bottom. Boom, just like that, okay? Now how you're going to align this tool is basically you want to line it up so the brass bottoms out at the bottom of this here, so that this small tool almost comes in contact with the cone at the base of the neck, okay? So after that, your piece of brass is now ready to go into your length cutter, okay? And that's what this tool is here, okay? It has a handle on this side. You press the handle down, it opens up these jaws here, okay? You put the jaws right there. Try and lock the rim of the brass in these jaws. Then what you're going to do is back here, this is basically like a stopper. It keeps it from going in too far, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to set the stopper using this, okay, with what measurement your book tells you need by doing this right here. Put that right at the back, and then you're just going to move this to wherever it needs to be, and then you're going to slide this up here till it makes contact with that. Let's say, for example purposes, it's right there. Boom. Okay? Now I'm going to come back here. I'm going to slide this lock collar up. Boom. Right here. I'm going to tighten the set screw down right here, and then now I cannot go any farther in than that point right there. So here we are now at our press. We've got our brass, that's all prepped, the right length, cleaned all up, neck, everything ready to go. First thing we're going to do, get out some materials, okay? Get out our die, make sure we got the right die. This here, can't recall what the name of it is, but this is a pretty handy deal. It just sets right in there, quarter turn, boom, it's locked in, ready to go. Look here. I got a mark and a mark, so I always put it in the same spot every time. Consistency is key, okay? Now we're going to move down here to our shell holder. Same thing, make sure you have the right shell holder in there, which we do, And I always mark them because consistency is key. Now, when you're getting a die for the first time and setting it up, basically what you're going to do is you're going to put it all the way up. You're going to put the press all the way up, okay, to the maxed out position. You're going to take your die, you're going to screw it down until it contacts the top of your shell holder, and then you're going to give it an extra quarter turn, and you're going to tighten your jam nut up. And that's how you're going to set the depth for a full-length resizing die. So now the next step is going to be to take our brass right here. This is one type of lubrication. There's more than one. This is what I use. This is just a normal stamp pad I got from Walmart. I put a lube on here, got this pad soaked. I haven't had to add lube to this and God knows how long, but basically all you're going to do is just take the brass, just kind of gently press it in a little bit and spin it on there. Rub it all around. You can kind of see it glowing on my fingers a little bit. Does not take much. Going to take a Q-tip, roll it around a little bit. Then you're going to take the Q-tip and stick it in the neck of the brass and just quickly run it around in there, okay? It does not take much lube. Not enough lube and the brass can start to bind inside of your die. If you get too much lube, it'll stick when you're trying to pull the brass back out of the die, okay? So we've got that all set up properly. We're going to go ahead, put our piece of brass in there, and we're just going to press all the way down until our press is maxed out. Then we're going to pull it back out, just like that. Now we're deprimed and ready to clean our priming hole, okay? So here's a little trick for you. When depriming, this press has a little hole on the bottom of it where the primers fall through. Literally just a little piece of radiator hose with a cap on the end of it. All I do is just slide that up on there when I'm ready to start depriming, and then it catches all of my primers, and then when I'm done I take the tube right off and dump it out. Now that we got our brass resized, we're ready to clean the primer pocket. It's a little hard to do with the camera, but here I'm just going to take a little tiny screwdriver that I have, and I'm just going to scrape inside of this hole, making sure to get in the corners and everywhere. And I stick it in the hole a little bit and just kind of spin it around in there gently. I don't want to mess up that flash hole that's in there. Okay. Just blow it out quickly. As you can see, it's pretty well cleaned out. Didn't use anything fancy, just a piece of crap screwdriver. Worked just fine. So now we got our piece of brass. We're going to move to our next step. This step, however, you're only going to be concerned about this if you're trying to get precision results, okay? If you're not getting precision results, then skip this step. So basically, you're going to take this here. This I purchased from Hornady. This is a pretty expensive piece here, but this is very, very handy. Comes with all these different attachments for different bullet diameters and stuff, different ways to measure on here. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to take our brass, put it on here, okay? Set it, make sure it's flat against that bar in the back, and then make sure that's resting in those two little steel balls there, okay? Now you're going to press down against the steel balls and hold it against the back, this piece of steel rod back here, and you're going to spin it, okay, while watching your dial indicator. And you're looking to make sure that you don't have any more than, I like to go by any more than 5 thousandths of an inch. And you can see, look at that. is almost goddamn perfect, okay? And that is basically just out of a bottom dollar press, okay? I'm pretty impressed with this press. Hot da-doonch. But I recommend that press for sure. So now that we got that, we got our piece of brass. We know that our neck is not oblong. We're ready to move to the next step. A little more detail into the case neck measurement. If you do have a case that is more than 5 thousandths out of round, what you're going to do is when you hit that high spot, what I like to do anyways, I hit that high spot, I hold it in between my index finger and my thumb, keep the brass facing the same way without spinning it, and I put it into my shell holder with the high spot facing this side. And then I press it back up into my full sizing die, pull it back out, put it back on my measuring table here, and check it again. 9 times out of 10, that fixes it. So we're ready to move to our next step here, and that's putting a primer in the piece of brass, okay? So here we've got our mount for our Lee primer loader. This I highly recommend getting. It just saves a bunch of time. So basically you put your primers in here, and this has grooves in it, so when you put the primers in, you just shake it around a little bit and it flips them all right side up for you, so you don't have to try and wrestle with it. Okay, so this just goes right in here like this. Sometimes this can be a little bit of a pain to get in, but not too bad. So that just hangs on there just like that, okay? So now you're going to grab your piece of brass and you're going to put it in your shell holder, okay? Make sure you still got your lines lined up. So you'll notice this piece right here, okay? This comes out if you wanted to, but I usually just leave it in there. And this is what puts your primer into brass, okay? So you just raise this up to right about there. And basically, this just rides on this flat surface here, makes contact with your primer holder, and boom, look at that. There's a primer in there. I didn't have any screwing around trying to fondle them little things, okay? And I'm going to come back down. I'm just going to give it a nice firm push. I don't want to get too crazy with it. Pull my piece of brass back out, kind of eyeball it up a little bit, make sure it looks like it's seated in there properly, make sure it's in far enough, and I can feel right now that it's not. So I'm going to stick my piece of brass back in there, give it another good push. Much better, much better. So now we're ready to move on to the next step. So now we're at the step of inserting powder, okay? I'm going to put what desired powder I want into my powder measure. Now this powder measure is fairly old. Just picked it up at a yard sale. It's not precise by any means, but I don't need it to be. You don't need it to be, okay? Basically, you just adjust this until you find the right grain of powder output. I put this under here, lift the lever up, and then when I come back down, it's going to dispense powder into my little tray, okay? Then my tray goes onto my scale, and I weigh it. But you want to make sure before you start weighing things that you have your scale zeroed. And I know this Hornady scale, they recommend you plugging into the wall and letting it sit, basically warming up for 5 minutes before you use it, because apparently somehow that can affect the accuracy of the scale. And this scale goes to 2/10 of a grain, which is good enough for me. So basically, I set that there. with the powder in it. Now I just wait for it to stop moving, and if it's kind of bouncing back and forth between a number you don't want and a number you want, I usually just blow on it real quick. It'll move the scale just a little bit, come back, and see what it measures again. Okay, so we set our powder measure up so it dispenses less powder than we're looking for. Reason being, powder trickler, okay? You're going to set this up here, basically, so that when you put that on your scale, you're going to measure it, make sure that you don't have enough powder, and you're just going to keep trickling. By spinning this, you're just going to keep trickling powder into your scale until you get your desired measurement. Okay, the reason that the scale comes with this is to cover it up. If my furnace is on and running, creating a little bit of breeze, windows open, it'll throw this scale off. Even if you're breathing too heavy, it'll throw it off. If you're concerned that your scale's not measuring accurately, that's what these are for, okay? They're labeled with how much they weigh, and you can calibrate it that way also, referring to your owner's manual. So now let's say we got a correct powder measurement in there. We're going to take our powder funnel. It's going to go right on our piece of brass. We're going to take our powder, and I like to kind of just slowly sprinkle it in there, let it flow down in there nicely. I always take this off and put it onto the next brass, so that way I don't worry about double loading one, and then I move it to the next slot, and I know that this row of brass has been loaded with powder. The next thing we're going to do, we've got our primer in there, we've got our powder in there, and now we're going to put our bullet in there. So we're going to put our piece of brass in the shell holder, make sure we got our die set up in here. Now this is an RCBS gold medal seating die. Basically it uses the ogive of the bullet to consistently set it down in there straight, or as straight as physically possible, okay? I'm going to pick what bullet I'm using, whatever. Something I would like to point out with these, if you'll notice, for precision purposes, I weigh every single bullet I get, okay? In this bag is 99.9 to 100.1 grain bullets, okay? The box is 100 grains, so I only go plus or minus 0.1 grains, okay? All of the bullets that are in here, these are bullets that weighed more or less than 0.1 from 100, okay? If that makes sense. This is Nosler. I did the same thing, okay? Now notice, this Nosler box, there's 50 rounds in here, okay? There's 100 rounds in here, in this Hornady box. Look at the difference. Look how many more Nosler bullets were out of whack compared to Hornady, and Hornady had twice as many bullets in this box, okay? Something else to note too, these bullets, some of these bullets were almost a half a grain off in weight. Now if you're not shooting precision, doesn't really matter too much. So now we've got our bullet. We're going to take it and we're going to load it inside our die just like this. Slides right in there nice like that. Lift up our little thing. Make sure it falls down in all the way. Okay? So now, if you're trying to adjust your seating depth, what you're going to do is turn this so it's out most of the way, okay? Then you're going to press your brass up in there all the way, pull it back out. Do it quick here. Gonna press our brass, press that bullet up in there, boom. Okay. Now we've got our bullet seated. So now we've got our notes. We're gonna check our notes to see what our desired seating depth is. And before, remember when I covered that I like to do ogive seating because it's more accurate of a measurement. And that's what this little tool is here, okay? This little thing measures from the bullet ogive. And it clamps right on your dial caliper. So boom, got that on there. It's not really going to be accurate, but I'm going to tighten this up a little bit, spin it a little bit, make sure I got an accurate measurement, which that's not going to be. But let's say, okay, it's not in far enough. So now we're going to put it back into our press, making sure that our lines are still lined up with that. And we're going to turn this down. We're going to press it again, okay? Boom. We'll come out. We're going to measure it again. Okay, good. We've got good overall length. Now we're going to leave our die alone, and we're going to keep pressing them in, checking them every so often for consistency. Now, you're going to come over here with your bullet loaded in the brass. And you're going to spin it again, okay? So now, same thing, a little bit more. We've got 2/1000ths of an inch run out on here. That's pretty darn good. Now, we're going to slide this over just a whisker. And we're going to measure the run out on our bullet. So now what do we got? 1, 2. Same thing. Usually your neck measurement is the same, going to be the same as your bullet measurement. So we've got about 2/1000ths of an inch bullet run out on this, which is pretty darn good. So now our bullet's loaded and we're ready to fire it. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us again here at Flint Eastwood's Armory. This has been a quick overview of the equipment with the process along with it. Make sure you like and follow the page. Make sure you go on Facebook and Instagram and check out Red Creek Outdoors and give us a like and a follow.